Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me. Today, instead of looking at any one particular watch, we want to take a moment to look at the financial reports from Casio and delve into the G Shock results. Now, of course, Casio is a very large organization. They have very many different businesses. They've got calculators, they've got musical instruments, educational devices, a whole range of different things. And they also innovate continually. But what we want to do is look specifically at their timepieces business. And their timepieces business is not exclusively G Shock. There's obviously Casio Watches, there's ProTrek, a range of different ones. But G Shock is predominantly the biggest thing that happens in their financial reports. And every time we do get a new financial report, we kind of get some insight as to where they are heading, where are they going to invest, what sort of watches might be dictating the innovation path that they're choosing to take. So it's always interesting to take a moment to look at these financial reports and look at what the management team is indicating that G Shock is looking to direct themselves to. So to do that, let's jump over to the actual results themselves. This report came out on May 13th, 2025. This is the fiscal year end reporting at March 31st, March 2025. Now, coming down, the first thing is obviously going to look at how well did the time business go, right? The timepieces business is the majority part of the Casio business, and this gives us some indication as to how the G Shock business is going, because if the G Shock business is the majority of the money being made in the timepieces business, then we can sort of make some educated guesses as to how well G Shock is actually doing at this point. So what they're saying is for quarter four, they made 41.1 billion yen. So in terms of what that looks like from a calculation point of view, let's just quickly pop up the calculator. And you can't necessarily see this, it's off screen at the moment, but let's have a look. We want Japanese yen, so yen, and we'll change that to USD, and we said 41.100000000. So that is around about 1, 2, 3. I think that is about $286 million. I could potentially have gotten that wrong, but anyway, look, it's 41 billion yen is what they actually did. And their results from 2024 were essentially 40.6 billion yen. So they have increased the numbers they've actually made over Q4. Now, in terms of increase, they're saying it's about 600 million yen, and that's a percentage increase of 101.4%, which doesn't seem right to me, because typically when you look at a year-on-year change, you are comparing the previous year to the current year. Now, the formula for that, let's do some mathematical calculations because I have to do stuff all the time, is typically your current results divided by last year's results minus 1. And if that were the case, the year-on-year increase would be a lot different. So let me do a quick calculation on this one here. Sorry if this is not interesting to people. I find numbers kind of interesting. So if it's 0.6 is the increase, so 0.6 divided by 40.6, and then we multiply that by 100, the increase should be about 1.4%. It's not 104. It's not 100. What are they saying here? 101.4%. 101.4% increase would essentially put them at around about $82 billion. So unless I'm calculating it incorrectly, it looks like their numbers are kind of off there. But the good thing is the business actually increased, right? So that's a positive sign. It didn't decrease, it actually increased from that point of view. So from a numbers point of view, company's doing okay. We could probably want a little bit more aggressive results because we're in a pretty healthy market now. Maybe some of the commentary on economic is a little bit challenging. So if we go down and have a look, let's jump past all the individual results. This is an interesting one. So we look at the actual revenue by region. So the H1 results there, you can see 85.4, March results 41.1. But where was the business done for G Shock? And it's mostly delivered by India and ASEAN countries at 16%. And then there's other, which I'm not sure what other actually is. I mean, typically ASEAN gets bundled up in other as well. So there's other at 43%, and India and ASEAN made 16% of that other market. China, 7%. Europe 19%, North America 15%, and Japan 16%. So this other market is fairly substantial. Maybe if we subtract everything else out, you maybe have Africa. I'm not so sure how big that actually is. Maybe some South America, perhaps. There's some interesting markets which aren't necessarily called out in this particular report, but that other market is fairly substantial. It's about 43% of the overall number. And what they're saying is that sales growth was in line with plans in all regions except China. And China is obviously a very, very big market, lots of spending power here, so the business is still slowing down here. Sales of G Shock models in the medium and high price range grew steadily, which is good. Sales of Casio watch were strong worldwide. Now, this is interesting because we talk about G Shock watches, but then we're also talking about Casio watches. And what you'll see as we go through the report, there is going to be an emphasis here on how do they build up the Casio brand and how G Shock brings that forward. So interesting to see that being called out here. So if we go down and have a look, this is some of the challenges they're sort of facing. So Japan, that grew by -1%. So tourists did lots of purchasing there. High-end products remain strong. That's good. North America grew 12%, which is great. Strong in e-commerce, which is awesome. Europe, 3% growth, not super strong. China, this is the one where we sort of see the slowdown. So -33% growth, which is sad. And then other 6% growth. So we see there India and ASEAN is going pretty well from that point of view as well. So, China definitely is the market which, if they can recover in China, then those numbers will obviously be a lot more stronger from that point of view as well. So let's go down and have a look here. This is where we start to get to the actual product themselves. And so you see 4 types of products being called out, which is driving their business. So at the very, very top here, the G Shock percentage, including Baby G, which is approximately 44%, so that's 44% of their timepieces business, of which metal models were 12% and resin was 32%, which kind of makes sense because the resin models can potentially be a cheaper type of G Shock watch, more accessible to a lot of other people. The metal watches obviously at a higher price point, but they're starting to build out a lot more of these metal models in an effort to capture that emerging market. So if we look at the G Shock, those typically are the metals and the MRGs. So the GM2110D, which is a really nice sort of watch that combines the analog and the digital together. It seems to be doing pretty well. GMW's B5000D, a full metal version, is also doing well worldwide. And then they've got here as well the MRG B2100, a B2100R with a design inspired by blue ink used in Japanese ink wash painting and calligraphy were firm worldwide. That's actually a nice watch. Let's just have a look quickly at that particular watch and how much it costs. So if we go to Shopbase and we say here MRG B2100, MRG B2100R. Yeah, I mean, it's a really, really nice watch, that one. So 550,000 yen for that particular watch, released in January 2025. So nice watch if you can go ahead and actually afford to get it. The resin ones that call out, obviously the GA B2100, one of my favorite watches, that's still going ahead and actually driving a lot of the actual sales. The GW M5610U, which is that evolution of what we've seen in the past with the DW 5000. That's going well in Japan and Europe. And then the GWG B1000, the flagship model. This is a watch we love, or I particularly love, the Mudmaster. This was strong in Europe and other regions, right? So it has that very big, solid sort of feel, very chunky watch on there, but doing very, very well. The other line is the G Shock Sports. So the GBD 200. It's got functions for training, remains strong in Europe and other regions, and in the DW H5600, which also has optical and acceleration sensors. So, we talked before about the G Shock watches, like the Android Wear watches, and how well they actually did and how we phased out of that market pretty quick. These watches now are predominantly the ones which we're talking about from health tracking features. Reality is, I don't see too many people actually wearing these when I go for a run. I still typically see most people using Android Wear watches or Apple watches and things like that. So I wonder, are people using these watches for training, or are they using it from a style point of view? I certainly think that the other watch there, the DWH5600, this one here, let's go ahead and actually have a look at a bigger version of it. So DWH5600, this sort of watch here, I get a feeling that people might go ahead and actually purchase this perhaps for some health tracking features, but it's also a very interesting looking watch as well. So are people actively using this watch as a health tracking? They may be using it from a daily driver point of view, but the report seems to say that it's doing pretty well from a market point of view. So yeah, maybe that's working out. The other one here is the other section, which is interesting, right? Because this is the sales of the Casio watch. Now, as we talk about this, it says here, Casio watch models were strong in all regions. So is Casio calling us out and saying, hey, we have the G Shock brand, but Casio as a watch, some of the things we go ahead and actually build here, which do have some elegance of style as you look at them, they're performing pretty well across the overall market. Like there's no specific region they're calling out. They're saying all regions. So there's potential growth in this particular space. So the Edifice watches, which are very nice looking watches, that seems to be doing pretty well in Europe and other regions. The Casio Standard, the Casio Classic, all watches which do look very, very nice. They're not as bold as a G Shock watch, but they are interesting watches all the same. So those seem to be doing pretty well as well. Now, as we look towards the future, what is the strategy that G Shock's actually adopting, or Casio's adopting, as it relates to G Shock? We can skip past some of the equipment here and jump down into the midterm management plan. So summary of second year. So they're going to try and increase corporate value. And here we can actually see downturn in a timepieces business. This is the situation they're facing in China. They want to go ahead and actually build this out. So if we come down, this is a hard thing to sort of see, but let's have a look here at the timepieces business. So decreased G Shock sales percentage despite slight increases in sales percentage of G Shock metal. So while G Shock metal watches went up in terms of purchasing, the overall G Shock business kind of came down. Expanded business, was significantly expanded business in India with the success of the ambassador program, which they called out they were going to do a while ago, and direct-to-consumer sales remained firm in Europe and the US. So from a percentage point of view, gone up 1% in terms of sales. India and ASEAN's gone up 2%, and direct-to-consumer sales has gone up 1%. So it's a fairly steady market. Let's come down here to the portfolio management policy. Okay, so this is interesting to sort of see how their plan's actually evolving, because they presented this plan earlier on and said how they were going to go ahead and actually shift their business. Now we're looking at how it's actually progressed. So in fact, if we were to go back and try and take a look at this very small one, previously in May, they had timepieces and scientific calculators trying to move them up from mature businesses to growth businesses. And what we're seeing now in May 2025 is that those businesses are moving closer to growth businesses, right? So there's obviously some aspect of success that the company's actually having in terms of taking the timepieces business into more of a growth area. How do they accelerate, right? A mature business isn't necessarily an area of the business which grows quickly. It's typically one which is fairly flat, consistent, drives business. And in this situation, it's pretty good for them because it's a profitable business. If you see down the bottom here, profitability, it means they make money off every watch they go ahead and actually sell. But they want to get high profit businesses up into growth. So you want to expand your market, make more money, make more profit. So that's where they want to be able to be. And so timepieces is moving up from where they were before. So if we go down here, and let's jump ahead to the time business strategy. Here's how they look at the timepieces business, or the watches. And this is probably the most interesting it actually gets around where's a G Shock strategy actually headed, or potentially not just G Shock, but the whole timepieces business for Casio. Where is it going to go? So what we can see is they split these up into three lines. The premium line, which is a high price range, the metal line, which is high and medium, and then the entry line, which is medium and low. So if we look at the left-hand side here, we've got high price to low price. And then what's interesting is the bottom is the slim and flat to big and bold. That's a really interesting sort of tangent to go ahead and actually look at your watches. Now, if you look at this, where they look at the actual watches is fairly definitive, where G Shock actually plays and where Casio watches actually play. Here, our G Shock watches sit in the big and bold and at the high price. So obviously, having your watches here in this area at the high price is the place you want to go ahead and actually be. Now, do you want to be big and bold or just want to have high prices? I would say you probably just want to be able to have high prices, but have a portfolio across big and bold and slim and flat. But they don't have slim and flat today in this space. It's just big and bold with the actual G Shock watches. So what they want to be able to go ahead and actually do is start to expand the sales of lineup of G Shock slim models. So how do you start to move some of these watches across over into this slim and flat model? Now, I don't necessarily know if that really makes it more profitable, but maybe it gives a better range of choices that they can go ahead and actually look at for watches on your wrist. Maybe you want a slim and flat watch that's a G Shock versus a big and bold one. But they want to move that across. In addition, what they want to do is they want to take the low price Casio watches and start to boost the profit margin by offering higher price range product for the Casio line. Now, how do you go ahead and actually do that? You've obviously got to look at quality of the actual watch. You've got to look at the features and all those different things. But we've got these Casio watches, which are very, very stylish. They want to be able to increase their market appeal, their quality, all those different things. What they're indicating here is they think that they want to use iconic styles for the G Shock entry line to improve the efficiency of advertising, and then that advertising will help them to elevate the visibility of the Casio watches. So it's an interesting model. They want to be able to take the advertising that they utilize for G Shock, take that brand, take that recognition, and start to utilize that to make their advertising for the Casio line of watches much more effective. And maybe one of the options here is to say, as their audience is starting to mature, certainly as people start to get older, maybe they want to be able to have a nice, thin and stylish watch. Maybe it goes with a suit or something more elegant. That's maybe what the Casio line can go ahead and actually do. So if you've got people captured on the G Shock line, this maybe gets them into the Casio line with something a little bit more stylish. But then again, people might be looking at different brands, but it's an option that they can go ahead and drive through. So interesting area. More specifically, into the actual regions themselves, they are now looking at what they can do for each of those different regions. Now, we've sort of said in the past, those growth areas for Casio, for G Shock, were typically India and ASEAN, but they are calling out now specifically many different markets that they're going to go focus on. And I think what we'll see here is that the programs they put in place for India, the ambassador program, is starting to be replicated across many other regions. And so starting from the right-hand side, India here, they want to further increase the profile of the G Shock brand by continuing to utilize two major brand ambassadors. So that is their approach, is having these two guys to be the brand ambassadors of their market. But we start to see now in ASEAN, they also want to appoint brand ambassadors to match their target audiences. So Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines, all brand ambassadors. Europe, they're looking at actually utilizing brand ambassadors as well. North America doesn't necessarily have brand ambassadors, but they're going to go ahead and actually expand their models through e-commerce, which is kind of like the model for many regions. E-commerce is pretty strong. And in Japan, same sort of thing. They want to go ahead and actually raise profile among youth and foreign visitors to Japan. So they want to be able to capture the tourist dollar as they go through. So this idea of brand ambassadors that was started in India is now permeating through many other regions as well. And G Shock and Casio hope to be able to capture more attention by having brand ambassadors to help bring it forward from that point of view. Now, you're probably asking at this point, okay, where's the cool new watches? And that's an interesting thing. So here's some of the indicators of the direction that the company might be heading. And it might be a bit of a shock to some of us, because some of these watches we talk about, we kind of like, they are really strange looking watches. But what they want to do here is expand the G Shock medium to high price range categories. So this is where we'll see a lot of the metal ones, right? And they've seen the results, right? So G Shock metal sales percentage has grown 5% year on year, which is a pretty decent sort of growth in a timepieces business where they're being sort of challenged. So seeing the metal line actually grow, and that metal line growing means essentially the higher profitable watches are doing well for them from that angle. So increased value added with new shapes, utilizing new materials and processing technologies and digital technology. So we might see new shapes of metal watches coming out to the marketplace for G Shock. What that looks like, I don't know. Maybe it's more rounder, maybe it's more squarish. Maybe they take some of the design cues from the Casio watches and bring that across to G Shock as well. But that metal line is something that they want to go and actually focus on. They want to develop efficient promotions by limiting the number of models. So what we'll see is much more of a direct and strategically invested set of watches we're going to go ahead and actually invest in. And then work to increase brand value by strengthening the global consistency of the G Shock brand. So, I mean, that just comes down to, as it says, is brand consistency, right? So the way G Shock is advertised in the US is the same way we'd see G Shock advertised in, say, ASEAN and India and all those different things based on those higher premium lines. So an interesting approach. The second area is the one which I think is interesting, initiatives to create new G Shock design categories. And the watch we actually see here is the VA001, if I can remember that is correct. VA001, is that right? Was it the GAV0? Let's have a look. Yeah, that's our watch there. So this particular watch, which can sometimes be fairly confronting, is starting to lead the way in terms of initiatives to create new G Shock design categories. We see this being called out here. Realized magnetic holding structure technology and shock release hand. We've talked about this previously on a previous video, where the technology in this particular watch, when you wear it, if there's a impact to the actual watch itself, rather than the watch hand sort of just get jolted around, it will disconnect and then reconnect from a magnetic point of view. So they're looking at actually utilizing new technologies to be able to, increase the value of the watch, introduce new technologies to maybe capture people's excitement or in imagination about what can actually happen. And then they also are calling out new designs that shape the G Shock identity. So this idea of creating interesting and innovative designs is not going anywhere too soon. So we might see more such watches, such as the GAV01, in the marketplace to try and actually capture more of those new design categories. And then the last one is really just a market sort of thing. So expand directly managed stores and direct e-commerce business. So loyal customers, Casio fans of digital marketing, and strengthen CRM marketing by deep data on user purchase history and own products. So there might be a little bit more data mining going on with people. Maybe they use the Casio app on your phone to synchronize the watches. I got a lot of watches tied up to that. I guess I probably would be part of that campaign as well. So really interesting approaches to what they want to go ahead and actually do. One last one I thought was interesting here in the report. Initiatives in new business, okay, so new areas, and everybody wants to build an AI product. And so here it is. This is the AI product that they're building here, which is the robotic pet Mouflon. Launched Mouflon, an AI robotic pet that evolves emotionally through daily contact based on the concept of always there for you. Aims to expand business and solve social issues in the mental wellness area going forward. So that's kind of cool. I mean, a lot of Japanese companies do have a big focus on social innovation and caring for people. So the Mouflon is an interesting product that Casio is going to go ahead and actually build. I don't know if it's going to necessarily change the business for them, but it's an interesting area to go ahead and develop on. The last thing I would sort of say, and again in terms of social awareness, Casio is looking at how they utilize some of these watches in terms of championing different causes. So environmental impact, so making sure that they highlight the investment in building packaging, which is better for the environment, so eco-friendly packaging, and also collaboration models. So things like Love the Sea and Earth, those sorts of collaborations that highlight social challenges is a good thing. And then also on human rights, they're talking about winning customer affinity through donations and real life experiences, and some of the watch models to support things such as Pink Ribbon, those sorts of things as well. So interesting view from the financial reports. Like, it doesn't necessarily tell us what are the new watches coming out. There's some very interesting new watches coming out. We've seen some weird collaborations with Crocs and things like that. But what this shows us is the direction of where G-Shock's going to go. We will see a bigger investment in metal watches. That is fairly clear, like they want to go after that from a profitability point of view. We might see an influence of Casio watches in G-Shock, or maybe the influence of G-Shock on Casio watches. What are they going to do in the slim watch design space? Because as they called out, Casio G-Shocks are kind of in that big and bold space. They want to be able to bring some of that in the slim watch area as well. So that could be an option for us in the future from that point of view. But the good thing is we're not seeing the Casio business decline. It's growing, but it's kind of more flat than anything else. So as long as we keep the business there, hopefully we'll keep seeing G-Shock watches coming through as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for having a look at the report. I'll put a link in the description if you want to go ahead and actually read for yourself. Like I say, sometimes the things we see on the websites, well, what is here today, but what we can actually see through the financial reports gives us some insight into the future. And I hope this has actually been interesting for you. And as always, please enjoy your G-Shock watches, and I hope you get to learn something from this video. I am using a different camera, by the way, as well, so it does look a little bit different. I'll be interested to get your feedback in terms of what you think. With that, ladies and gentlemen, have a great weekend. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.